Please welcome my first guest, America's accountant, Daniel Geltrude, to the show. Dan, thanks for making the show. Really appreciate you taking the time. You know, slowly but surely, we've been talking about this over the last few weeks, maybe months, but there's starting to be some cracks, and they're starting to see some job losses, or at least folks starting to talk about it. What do you say?
Well, here's how I see it, Scott. What we're now experiencing is that businesses are adjusting and they're right-sizing. What does that mean? They found that they didn't have to, or they had to find a way not to be so reliant on labor. How do you work around that? Is it outsourcing? Is it technology? Whatever the case. Now you have to look at it and say they are focusing in on the bottom line. The biggest expense is always labor. So now they're looking at it and saying, you know what? Let's hold off on hiring more people, and let's even look at, can we start to cut back on our labor? And when that happens, Scott, that's the filling out of the trifecta of stagflation.
Right.
So it's inflation, slowing economy, and then growing unemployment. So we're right at the cusp.
And so this is something that I think a lot of viewers out there really haven't really seen. And that's when you've got, say, food and fuel going through the roof. And we've actually seen GDPs, our gross domestic product, start to contract. So our economy is getting smaller as a couple of big ticket items like food and fuel go through the roof. And then slowly but surely, you start to see folks get laid off. And that's what you mean by the trifecta of stagflation. And that's something that is now becoming very real. Now, we've posted some really low, unemployment rates, and that's been great, right? Everybody wants to see everybody back to work. But when you've got these retailers out there, and look at what happened to Target and Walmart. And I think, you put it in a note to us, but I already had said it to myself. And I think the market last week got surprised, because if it can happen to Walmart and Target, that means it can happen to anybody, right? And they got surprised by high costs when it came to freight and getting their things around the country. And they started to also mention labor, right?
Absolutely. Listen, Scott, you know how I see this shaping up is there are necessities that people must have, right? They got to have shelter, so they got to pay their rent and mortgage. Maybe not, but they need that. They need food and some other things that they absolutely have to have. When you start to go beyond that, people are now at the point where inflation is so high, they're making those tough decisions in terms of not what I want to have, what I need to have. And to me, that's what's now causing the slowdown in the economy, because people are not spending beyond the necessities. So when you have places like Target and some others, people are saying, well, I don't need that. If I have to make a choice between one of those ancillary items or putting food on the table, which is too expensive to start with, I got to go with food. So to me, it's making a lot of sense as to what's happening right now.
And do you think that I think they've run out of their stimulus money. I don't think that's there anymore. But I also think that the high fuel and food costs have really eaten to, I guess that's what you're trying to say, some of that extra spending money that they have lying around. It's just not there anymore. And that's slowly but surely going to start to bite too. Now, I'm going to interject something here that nobody's really ever talked about yet, because I sit at this desk here all day long and I look at everything when it comes to commodities, a little bit of the equities and the bonds as well. But I'll tell you right now, Dan, there are slowly but surely signs that the consumer just doesn't have the pocketbook or the stomach for some of the, say, we're starting with small things like cotton, right? I think that might have been something to do with what happened at Target, but cotton, the higher prices is curing higher prices in cotton. Also milk, it's really odd, but higher prices have started to cure some higher prices in milk. Are we going to be slowly but surely start to see some of the things that aren't really like food and fuel, those things come off in price, but we still see really high fuel and food costs?
Oh, yeah, I think that's absolutely what's going to happen. And again, it makes sense. And on top of it, Scott, we have to look at how does the consumer feel right now? They're out there doing the best they can with their budget, and where are we going to spend our dollars? Then if they have the stomach to look at their 401k or any investments they have, and they're watching what's going on there, well, now you have full-on financial anxiety. And when that happens, you have people that start retracting completely from spending. So again, this thing is lining up for the perfect storm, and it's all a result of bad economic policy, and they cannot turn this ship fast enough at this point. So I think we're in our circumstance right now for the long haul, unfortunately.
Right. It's no longer the PT-109. This is an aircraft carrier that's going to take a lot more, just a few policy changes to turn its directions around. I know some of the viewers are going to ask me later if I don't ask you now. Real quick, do you think we're getting anywhere near the bottom in this equity market sell-off?
Actually, I don't. I think we have a little ways to go, Scott. I think there's so much uncertainty ahead of us right now. I would not be surprised if we can continue to see the market tumble until when? November, because that's when you have a shot at policies changing. Just my guess.
That could be right. And I also think that we've had a few other folks talk about it, but just because it stops going down doesn't mean it's going to turn around and go straight back up like we've seen happen in the past, because they're still going to have a lot of those headwinds. And I'm more in that camp that we might see. We haven't really seen total capitulation. When we start to see that, then we get to those bottoms. Maybe you're right when it happens in November, but we're not going to see the snapback like we saw happen in 2020 over the pandemic, because we've just got too much going on out there that'll get in the way of it. And I think that that's going to be, who knows? We could be in a couple of years of 8% growth, 5% growth. That wouldn't be that bad. So, all right, that's awesome stuff, man. Dan, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you for being on the show. I love it.